has, oops, sorry. This was, okay, it was from your side. You are recording now, yeah? It's not my side, huh?
Yeah, I suppose from the
Okay,
side, yeah.
I have my lecture divided, so to say, into two parts. There comes first a kind of more, sorry, I'm also concentrating on the techniques. So you see the slide now, yeah?
Yes, I see the slide, exactly. Yeah.
So first, I have a small theoretical part because I think that maybe not everybody is completely acquainted with the different forms of Hinduism and what that means. And so there will be a little bit of a theoretical introduction. And after that, we will look at one example of what I here call village religion or the small tradition. So there is a little bit of difficulties with the terminology because there is no really established terminology for these kind of things. We will speak about that. So what is today called Hinduism is in fact a collection of many different religious forms, put for convenience's sake under one label. If I say for convenience's sake, that's something which goes back finally, I mean, the final establishment of this term for this collection of religions goes back maybe to Swami Vivekananda and his lecture about Hinduism during I think it was called the Congress of Religions in the very beginning of the 20th century. So in fact, Hinduism is has a very, very broad spectrum. And there are two extremes of this collection. There are on the one side, the very high form of temple religion carried out and being controlled by Brahmin priests, situated in elaborate temple constructions, some of them very clear expressions also of royal power. I think this might be the picture of India and the picture of Hinduism, which most of you will have before your eyes when you think of India. You will have seen, if you have never been to India so far, you will at least have seen pictures of these big temples and so on, which are very often the royal temples, which also are symbols of royal power and which house the Brahmanical form of religion. So these temples did at no time really reflect the religion of the villagers who would visit them, if at all, then only until the large courtyards, as they normally were never allowed into the inner parts of the buildings. And so they would go only on very special occasions when there were annual festivals and the ruler or rich people of the community would invite the entire village for a festive meal and so on. But most of the villagers would only be allowed into the courtyards and never into the interior part of the temple. So this also means that they would in most cases not really identify themselves with this kind of religion and ritual in which powerful gods, the rulers of heavenly abodes, they share some of their power with the human king. This is the one extreme of what we find under Hinduism. The other extreme is formed by what I will now call tribal religions, which have also been incorporated under this label of Hinduism. These religions are generally animistic, which means that tribal people believe that the nature around them is animate. Tribals see themselves as the children of Father Sun and Mother Earth, and they understand themselves as the brothers and sisters of trees, waters, animals, and whatever occurs in nature, which also accounts, by the way, for the great interest in questions of ecological concern, something which I saw growing very much during the last years that I spent in India, so that tribal people got more and more politicized and always went for questions and for discussions of ecological things and so on. So somewhere in the middle between these two extremes, so the Brahmanical religion in the big temples and the tribal religion, which takes place most often in the open and not even in any building. So it's just in nature and for nature and with nature. So between these two extremes and in different gradations, tending more to the one or to the other of the two, are situated the different forms of village religion, which are the subject of today's talk. Just let me see. We should go to the next. Right? Yeah. So we have to look a moment at the difference between what is most commonly called today the great tradition and the little tradition, or village religion, but then we don't have a real counterpart. We don't take as a counterpart urban religion. It would also be wrong. And even great tradition and little tradition is wrong, because if you look at the Indian population, only about, I think, India-wide, maybe 5% of the population are Brahmins, and the much larger part of the population is non-Brahmin, and thus, I mean, the little tradition would, in fact, have many more devotees than the great tradition, you know? Also, village religion and urban religion is wrong, because you might have Brahmanical religious traditions in certain villages, and you might have these kind of little tradition religion with shrines of non-Brahmanical gods somewhere in some parts of the big cities of India. When village people migrate to the cities, from their villages to the cities, they normally take along with them their gods and rebuild the shrines and go on with their religion as they have done in the villages. This great tradition, as I will call it for the moment, is represented by the main temple, either in the center of the village or of the town. And it will be tended to by a Brahmin family or by a group of Brahmins. And the most important thing is the worship takes place in the Brahmanical form and with Sanskrit texts as the base. So the sacred texts which are used in this kind of worship are Sanskrit texts. The little tradition, on the other hand, takes place in small shrines in the different parts of the village, as well as, most importantly, outside the actual settlement, at the borders of the land that belongs to the village, or in sacred groves, at lakes, rivers, and so on. So this little tradition normally does not have Brahmanical priests, allow for some exceptions, which we will speak about afterwards. The worship, most importantly, again, is not in Sanskrit, but in vernacular languages. When we speak about Tamil Nadu, the worship in Tamil Nadu village deity shrines is in Tamil language. And then the main characteristics, I would say, which divide these little traditions from the great tradition is trance and blood sacrifices, which are there in the village religions, so in the so-called little tradition. It is extremely difficult to draw a clear borderline between these two traditions. So village religions have grown out of local and regional pre-Brahmanical elements. So they stem back to times long before Brahmins entered India from the northwest, and then afterwards, in the course of several thousand years, populated the entire continent and brought their culture to the entire Indian subcontinent. So they have a lot of pre-Brahmanical elements, which nevertheless have changed under the influence of Brahmanical and other cultural elements. Puranic stories, for example. So the Puranas are a set of stories which tell all kinds of events concerning the deities and their worship and the mythologies and so on. So they are found everywhere in the great temples of Brahmanical tradition, as well as attached to village shrines. So though in the case of the latter, the village shrines, the Puranic elements are often secondary and the deities have their very own individual and regional story attached to them. I'm speaking here out of fieldwork experiences. So I collected a lot of stories about several village deities and so on. And very often the people who tell the stories, they start with the very well-known common Puranic story, which they know also from hearsay, because nobody in the villages knows any Sanskrit. And then after a time, I mean, very regional elements and very regional events mix into the stories. And the story finally is a story about what happened when this particular god came to this particular village and resided here and so on. So one more development which makes it only more difficult to see a borderline between the different traditions is the still ongoing process of identification of village gods with the high pantheon. So some recent examples are, for instance, that Aiyanar, about whom we are speaking afterwards, becomes Ayyappan, or Karupan becomes identified with Krishna, and so on. So this process is often called Sanskritization. That's a term which goes back to the very famous and very important Indian sociologist M.N. Srinivas. It's called Sanskritization because it's a kind of, well, village traditions going into the direction of Brahmanical traditions, and Brahmanical traditions have Sanskrit as their linguistic base. Main characteristics of village religion, I told before, are on the one hand, trance and possession. So trance, if we speak of the Tamil tradition, which is in the focus of our lecture today, trance in Tamil Nadu always is understood as the person who goes into trance being possessed. And there are two forms of trance or of possession. One is the positive possession and one the negative one. The positive possession is a possession by gods and deities, either ritual and regular and in a controlled manner, by a priest who carries out certain parts of a ritual in trance and other parts again out of trance. Or it can be occasional and sudden and completely uncontrolled. So any devotee may get into trance during a ritual for village deities. So the person who goes into trance is regarded as a kind of mouthpiece of the deity who took possession of him or of her, and is then also used in order to help others to solve their problems, their domestic problems, or entire village problems, and so on. In certain rituals and festivals, such a positive possession is part of the ritual, is a very integral part of the ritual, so it's a must then in the ritual. And in the village, there is normally one hereditary family which carries out this possession part of the ritual. It would be regarded as a very, very negative sign if the person who has been chosen that year to carry out that ritual would not get into the right trance, since this would mean that the god or the deity is not satisfied either with this person or with his family or maybe with the entire village, and would not accept the offerings of that person. Consequences in daily life after the festival would be enormous. So people are always in a very, very tense mood when the person who has been chosen for this role is in the process of getting into trance. So if he does not get into the trance, that might have enormous consequences for the entire village until the next festival. Then there's also the other side of this. It's the negative possession, which has many forms. So certain forms of psychological problems. For instance, all those things which in Freudian psychotherapy would be counted among the forms of hysteria, but also other kinds of diseases and so on, are interpreted as possession by malevolent spirits and demons. And in these cases, exorcisms are done in certain village shrines by priests who are specialists in this field. Very often, by the way, these exorcists are Muslims. So in South India, Islam is still largely Sufi Islam, especially in Tamil Nadu. And they are attached to Sufi dargahs, which are the tombs of Muslim saints. And the customers can belong to any religion, to Hinduism, to Christianity, whatsoever. At least in South India, the border between the different religions like Islam and Hinduism, they are very open when it comes to rural settings and little traditions. So many more things could be said about trance and so on, but let us stop here with this because time is running. So the second very important element which makes the difference between Brahmanical religion and village religion are blood sacrifices. So the pantheon of village gods is nowadays divided into pure vegetarian deities who nowadays often receive a rather Brahmanical type of worship. So this means they get those offerings which are also given in the big Brahmanical temples to the great gods of the high pantheon. And it even occurs that temples of these pure village deities have been handed over to Brahmins. If this is a point of interest to you, we can speak about that in the question answer session if you want. And the so-called impure, I mean in the Brahmanical sense, impure, non-vegetarian deities, they are tended to by other non-Brahmanical priests. So most often the non-vegetarian gods occupy the place and the position of guardians of the shrines of the vegetarian ones. And often an important vegetarian deity has among his or her associates at least one non-vegetarian god. During festivals in such mixed temples, first the vegetarian gods receive their offerings, and then a screen is drawn before their shrine so that they might not have to witness the sacrifices that take place for the other deities. The pure gods normally face east, like also normally gods in the big temples do. And the impure gods, so those which get non-vegetarian sacrifices, face either north or south, because these impure gods are considered to be very good warriors and fighters, and they can be trusted with keeping everything that is dangerous for the village away. And the north and the south are regarded as the dangerous directions. So just another little remark about the sacrifices. The most common sacrificial animals nowadays are roosters, and for greater occasions, goats. And there are a few deities, all of them female, who used to receive a sacrifice of buffaloes. Such a tradition is still living in very few places. Known to me are 1 or 2 places in Andhra Pradesh and 1 place in Tamil Nadu. So much for theoretical introductions. We can speak a little bit more about some of the points if you want afterwards. But let me now come to the example, and a few things will also be spoken again about here. Oops. Yeah. So we want to look especially at the Tamil village guardian deity Aiyanar, and then also at his most important devotees and servants, which is the Velar community in and around the city of Madurai. Velar is the name of a caste of potters who make effigies like what you see here, these horses, which are very important in the worship of Aiyanar, because Aiyanar and his helpers, they are guarding the village, and especially at night, they are considered to ride around the village and the lands which belong to the village, and to keep everything evil away. And for riding around the village, they need these horses, which are made by clay, or which are made in clay. So, village religion is really primarily concerned with issues and items which are crucial for the people's survival and the smooth functioning of their daily life. So most of India's villages are agricultural settlements, hence the village deities in such places are gods concerned with agricultural life. So they are guardians of the fields and of the cattle, deities responsible for seasonal rains, and so on and so on. You see here, for instance, one deity settled right inside a grove of banana plants. And here, these are deities which are set at the foot of a tree, which is just at the border of one field. So they are worshipped sometimes also without any enclosure, without any structural building inside nature. So this makes them very near to what I told before about tribal religions, which also are very often in the open. Here we are in an agricultural settlement, and since the Velar potters are also all living in agricultural regions, we will remain in this realm for the lecture, but I just want to mention that in fishermen's villages along the seashores, the same deities, also Aiyanar and his helpers, they would then be rather responsible for the climate over the sea, for the availability of as much fish as possible and as near to the coast as possible, and also for the safe return of the fishermen. So you see, the responsibility of the gods is always very, very tightly attached to the living style of the people who worship them in the different regions. This makes this kind of religion very regional, so we cannot say anything general about these gods. It depends on where we are, where these gods are, and what is the main occupation of that region. So then there are a few among these deities, some of them even part of Aiyanar temples, and they are commonly worshipped by everybody because they are responsible for illnesses and epidemics. So this means especially to keep them away. So they receive offerings of body parts, either formed in clay or plaster, or in some places stamped into small metal plates and then cut out. So here, for instance, you see some legs. These are they are very well. They are not very finely made. They are made very quickly, and they are just symbols for the body parts in which you have some illness and so on. So you have legs here, you have heads, you have eyes, you have something here, which I think this should be a stomach. So if you have some stomach ache and so on. So each and every part of the body is represented here. And the devotees who go to this temple, this here is a temple of goddess Mariamma, who is responsible for illnesses. Everybody who goes to this temple in order to pray to the deity, in order to get rid of some illness, or for on behalf of a relative who is ill, people would then buy the respective body part and bring that as an offering to the deity. So this is, let us say, from an economical point of view, another source of income for these kind of potters, because potters nowadays, I mean, in the time of plastic and stainless steel and so on, they cannot really earn their living from their art or from their craft. So it's rather a craft which is dying out. So village gods share the life of the rural people. So hence it is only natural that they also share their likes and dislikes, which means the largest percentage of people adhering to these religions is non-vegetarian. So very often in the West, I mean, I come from Germany. Germany has a very romantic view onto India, which really stems back to the time, to the era of romanticism and so on. And for many people in Germany, it's like India is a country of all people being spiritual and everybody is vegetarian and so on, which is not true at all. So the largest percentage of the people are non-vegetarian people, and they have gods which are also meat eaters. This means the gods, they share those things which the people also like most. And the village people bring to their gods those things which are the most important and most liked things by themselves. So this means the gods receive sacrifices, generally of roosters or of goats. So don't be afraid. I don't go more far in showing you these aspects of things, but you see here a goat which is just made ready for being sacrificed. So the goat is first bathed in cold water, and then it has to shiver in a certain manner, which the people then take as a sign that the god has accepted this sacrifice, and then the head is cut, and well, afterwards there comes a big communal feast. So entire villages together then eat the sacrifices which has first been given to the gods. Other things which the gods get is arak, so some kind of rice liquor or liquor made from sugarcane, and cheruds, which are very pungent Indian, very raw cigars. So cigars made from very raw tobacco. So it's already difficult to stay near someone who smokes it because it's really very pungent. So these offerings are, as already mentioned in the introduction, one of the main distinguishing marks between the Brahmanical religion and the village type of worship. In Brahmanical religion, the gods receive only so-called pure kinds of offerings like sweetened milk rice, coconuts, bananas, betel leaves, joss sticks, camphor, flowers, and other such things, and definitely no blood sacrifices. Throwing another glance, so this time really also with pictures, onto the element of trance, so which is the other very important distinguishing feature in the worship of village deity. So trance comes in different forms. We have already spoken about it. Let us just have a look here at this kind of controlled and uncontrolled trance. So you see here two pictures which show a kind of controlled trance. So you see here different priests who carry out a very long ritual that goes throughout the night, and certain parts of that ritual have to be carried out in trance. So the priests have to see that they get into the right trance at the right moment. And then at the right moment, they have to get out of the trance again, because other parts of the ritual have to be carried out not in trance. And this changes throughout the night several times. Then there is another ritual trance, which is also well controlled. And this is the trance of initiated devotees, like this young man here, who are carrying the deity's weapons and the so-called Shakti Karagam, which is a pot or a vessel decorated with flowers and with other kind of things. It is filled with water from a sacred water place, a so-called tirtha, and that water is brought to the temple of the deity. And this young man, at the moment when the water is filled, into the vessel, and when he gets it to carry it on his head, at that moment he has to get into the right kind of trance, and he has to remain in trance until he delivers this pot to the deity. So he might have to walk an hour or two from the kirta to the temple. And it is very important that he stays in this trance, because otherwise some calamities will befall the village, according to the belief of the villagers. After he delivers this pot to the deities, he normally will immediately get out of the trance and fall unconscious for a short moment. And then some rituals are carried out on him. So he is given sacred ashes and other kind of rituals. And then he wakes up out of his unconsciousness. He will feel very tired then, but he will feel very well. So I have interviewed people who did this kind of trance. There are also rituals where people do in certain for certain festivals, where they do some kind of self-mutilation. So putting spears through their faces or through their tongue or elsewhere on their body and so on. And I've interviewed people, and they swear that when they are in the right kind of trance, while they are doing this, and then maybe going in procession for hours with these weapons put into their bodies, they do not feel any pain, and it is not uncomfortable and so on. So, right. So let us look at Aiyanar. He is the most important village deity in almost the entire Tamil Nadu, but for the very south of Tamil Nadu. So the extreme south of Tamil Nadu has an entirely different set of village deities, which means that the extreme south of Tamil Nadu is culturally completely different from the rest of Tamil Nadu. So we do not know where the Dravidians came from, how they settled there, when they settled there, and so on. But it is very clear that the southernmost part of Tamil Nadu has been first settled by people maybe who came from another region than people who settled in the rest of Tamil Nadu, because there's so extreme differences in the people's religion and culture and so on that we cannot think otherwise. Well, Aiyanar, he is considered to be the main guardian of the village, the surrounding fields, and I mean near the sea also everything that regards fishermen villages. His temples are in the agricultural tracts, normally situated at the border of the village's land, not at the border of the inhabited space of the village, and not inside the inhabited space of the village, but at the border of the lands which belong to the village. Because his function is to keep everything evil away from the village. So it doesn't make sense if he is inside the village, when he starts his work from there, then the evil has already entered the village. So he must keep the evil away from the village, so his places are always outside the land which belongs to the village. Sometimes this can be miles and miles and miles. So the processions which are made for the installation of clay horses, we afterwards see a few pictures of that. They may take a long time, because people have to carry these clay effigies of horses and of other deities and so on. They may have to carry them for miles together, and it may take several hours until they reach the temple. Aiyanar is always accompanied by a number of different minor deities, usually 20, so that the total number of gods in such a village temple amounts to 21 gods. So Aiyanar and 20 other gods. In very small or very poor villages, it might be less. And among these minor deities, always one is the very close associate of Aiyanar. We will see him in the next slide. But you see here we have one temple which is far outside the village it belongs to. But here we have one temple, which is, you see here, part of the compound wall, which is inside one compound. And inside this compound, you have different shrines. And all the 21 deities, they are distributed over these different shrines. The main shrine is dedicated to Aiyanar. A second, also somewhat large and elaborate shrine is dedicated to his close associate. And then the other deities are put together here in groups into the different shrines. There are also villages where the village temples, where the village deities are not within one compound, within one temple compound, but where these different shrines are distributed around the village, so that you have some deities in the north of the village, some deities in the south of the village, and so on. So that there the deities really surround the entire village and its lands. So the close associate of Aiyanar, so his main helper, differs in identity from region to region. Just a few examples. He is, for instance, called a Muni in northern Tamil Nadu. And you see that he wears a very strange costume. For those of you who know Tamil Nadu, know what this is. In North Tamil Nadu, there is a certain kind of folkloristic village theater with dancing, singing, and storytelling. So it's all mythological stories. And it's called Terukutu or Kattaikutu. And these things here, the dancers will wear things like this, which are made out of a very light kind of wood. These things are called kattai, or plates, which they carry on their shoulders and around. So it's a kind of very special costume which belongs to the folklore only of the northern parts of Tamil Nadu. So in the northern parts of Tamil Nadu, Aiyanar's close associate always comes in this kattaikutu or terukutu costume, and he's called a Muni. In other parts of Tamil Nadu, he is Karupan, for instance, in the region of Madurai, more in the south, but also in the region of Coimbatore and Salem, which is in the northwest of Tamil Nadu. So then again, he is called Madurai Veeran, which is the hero of Madurai in the region around the city of Tanjavur. He's called Madurai Veeran because in ancient times he is. There is a story that in ancient times he helped the king of Madurai to subdue some unruly castes in the city of in and around Madurai. And his native place is Tanjavur. So he's called the hero of Madurai because there he did his heroic deeds, not because he is really coming from Madurai. But he is nowadays also worshipped in Madurai very widely. So all the Aiyanar temples in Madurai have Karupan as the main associate. So although the identity of this associate of Aiyanar differs from region to region, his characteristics normally remain the same. He is ferocious, non-vegetarian, who by the devotees is more feared than loved, and he is thus worshipped more in a propitiatory way than in the way of bhakti or loving devotion. So we can say that, if we want to use Sanskrit terms, that this associate of Aiyanar, he is worshipped out of Bhaya Bhakti, which means it's a bhakti, so a kind of religious devotion which comes out of fear, Bhayam. Aiyanar himself nowadays is everywhere where I have seen Aiyanar temples, a vegetarian deity, although I doubt very much whether he has always been such. So it must have been through a course of early Sanskritization that Aiyanar, the most important village deity, became vegetarian and thus became nearer to the high pantheon deities, so Shiva, Vishnu, and so on, in the village. So during the past decades, he increasingly, like that, adopted characteristics of a Brahmanical god. and that to such an extent that in a number of his temples, the officiating priests are now Brahmins of relatively lower Brahmanical castes. Also, Brahmins are coming in different castes, and lower Brahmanical castes now tend to Aiyanar. This has an economic background, especially in the region of Tanjavur, where the Brahmanical population, the percentage of Brahmanical population is very high. There were many Brahmins without an income, and then Brahmins of lower caste, they were put by the government as priests for Aiyanar temples, but only for Aiyanar himself, so not for the other gods, because a Brahmin cannot tend to a non-vegetarian deity. So this means the Sanskritization of Aiyanar also had a kind of economic background. We can also speak about that again if you want in the question session. Now let us have a short look. I see our time is already starting to run out. At the Velar of Madurai, the Velar potters. It's a community which is deeply involved in the worship of Aiyanar. These Velar people are not confined to the city of Madurai alone, but they live in 56 villages of the region, mainly along the river Vaigai, which goes through the city of Madurai. The Velar traditionally live from the production and the sale of earthenware, pots, water jars, country stoves, all these kind of things. And since these products are nowadays more and more replaced, as I already told, by stainless steel and plastic, the art of the Velar really is under the threat of dying out. So I become a little bit personal so that I can tell you a little bit of my experience. So I was 20 years married to one Velar, to one Madurai Velar. And my husband, he also accompanied me wherever I went. And as Professor Brünemann told, I have lived and worked for around 7 years in the city of Singapore. And in Singapore, we met a lot of cousins and other a little bit more far relatives of my husband. So all of them Velar, who could not find any job anymore in India to sustain their families. So they went abroad. So some went to Arabia, some went to Singapore, to Malaysia, and so on to earn their living. But they all will come back to their native village when in the village one Aiyanar festival is about to start. And because then they are all necessary there in the village to make the clay figures, which is their trademark, so to say. Because this is what they are mainly famous for, the creation of clay statues that are used in the worship of Aiyanar. So here we see one Aiyanar figure on a horse. Here we see one Karupan figure. By the way, because of this ritual art in which they create the effigies of living beings from earth, they understand themselves as being direct descendants of the creator god Brahman, or Brahma. So from this, they derive the right to wear the sacred cord. You see here Velar priests in one of their temples wearing the sacred cord, especially those Velar who produce the horses and the other statues for the worship of Aiyanar. They get an initiation and they get the sacred cord, just like Brahmins. So here you also see a Velar priest who is doing worship in a shrine of Aiyanar. He's also wearing the sacred cord. Okay, I jumped back. Okay, so without the work of the Velar, the worship of Aiyanar would not be possible, because Aiyanar and his hordes, they would not be able to carry out their function as guardians of the village. Because if the Velar do not produce the clay horses, Aiyanar and his helpers cannot ride around the village. So hence also the main festival in Aiyanar temples is the installation of clay horses. This has been done in earlier times, if possible, every year. Nowadays, in many villages, it is only every 10 or 20 years. I have seen such festivals happen in villages after a gap of 40 or 50 years. So you see the ready clay horses are installed inside the village, in front of the house of the main potter. And then one of the potter priests will come and take a rooster, cut a little bit the one leg of the rooster so that a few drops of blood will come out. And then he will carry out on all the clay statues that are going in the procession the eye-opening ceremony by touching the eyes of the horses and of all the other statues with the blood from the rooster and doing some Tamil mantras and so on. And then just for the time of the procession, these effigies will be temporary vessels of divine power, and for the duration of the procession, they are venerated and worshipped. So they are then taken in procession, first through the entire village. They will stop in front of each and every village temple there, and every deity that day will get some worship and some sacrifice, so that no deity will get jealous of Aiyanar and the other deities. And then finally, they will be carried sometimes miles away to the Aiyanar temple. And the effigies are then installed in the temple, get a final puja. Puja means a worship, get a final worship. Then the community is assembling in the temple grounds, or if they are not big enough, then just outside the temple for a great communal feast. And then the festival is over. And then these effigies are no more carrying the divine powers. So they have been only temporarily the seeds of divine powers. And after that, they are just left in the temple compounds or near the temple. And they are left to the impact of the sun, of the monsoon rains, and of insects. You see here one clay horse, roughly 1 year after its installation. You see that here half the head is broken off, half the mouthpiece is broken off, one leg is broken off, the other legs are also already damaged. So very soon, this horse and the statue, they will completely fall. This doesn't matter. They are meant to be only temporary seeds of divine power. They are now no more worshipped, and they are just not taken away from there, because once they were sacred. So you have outside in the village grounds and where there is a lot of place, you will have sometimes relics of decades and decades of worship. So if you really look at this picture here, you see rows and rows and rows of decayed horses, and they will just be shifted away. This here is the main shrine of Aiyanar in this very far outside village temple. It's situated right inside the jungle. And you see that here for the festival, a new row of horses and figures have been installed. And for that, the old ones have been shifted away. They will be shifted away and further away and further away. But nobody will ever take a single piece from such a clay statue and remove it. So they will remain at that place. They will decay more and more. So you see here, you see thousands and thousands of statues, yeah? So they will decay more and more and more. They will go more and more back into the earth, so the element they are made from, until they really merge again with the earth. And after another rain or two, you will not even see this part of the head which still lies there. So it will completely merge with the earth. Also, the process of firing them, well, they are not fired at a very high temperature because they are meant to be only temporary effigies, and they are meant to go back to the element they came from. So I hope that with this, I could, within the short span of time, give you a little glimpse into this very interesting world of Indian village religion. In fact, this, in my view, is in many respects the real India, much more than the Brahmanical Sanskrit-based culture of the great temples. Just to finish, I brought a few numbers. So bear in mind that Brahmins account for only about 5% of India's entire population. In the state of Tamil Nadu, they account for less than 3% of the population. And to put things into perspective, the pan-Indian Muslim population is around 14% in the whole of India. In Tamil Nadu, it is less than 6%. So from this, you can see that most of the people naturally are adherents to this kind of village religion, which I have tried to bring a little bit before your eyes. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor.